Hey guys, it's Tommy Gunn from Cracked Rabbit Gaming, and this is just going to be a program overview for RPG Maker VX Ace. Basically for people who have never opened the program, never touched it before, or for people who have a little bit but you just don't know what every single little button does. I'm just going to kind of quickly go through it, not go into a ton of detail on every single thing, but just kind of get you started so you know what everything does. So this is a brand new project. So this is completely default. Everything here is what you should see pretty much when you start the program. So we have our maps down in our bottom left corner, and we have our main window here with just the default map that's all water plus your character. And then we've got our tiles up here that we can add. So first things, just to start it off, we'll right click on our map down here and go to map properties. And of course there's always shortcuts for these things. So as you can see, you can hit spacebar if this is already highlighted, and that'll bring up your map properties. You can also add a new map, load a sample map, generate a dungeon, so it'll randomly generate something. Of course, you should start with a large map before you generate, otherwise this is a tiny map right now. And then shift will move the map back and forth, so maybe you didn't, you want to make the map bigger, but then you want it to be centered, you can shift the whole thing over. And you can copy and paste maps, so you can try different things or whatever. Anyway, so here we'll just name this test, and the display name, same thing. So the name is what it's going to show down here, and then the display name is going to be in the game, what the player will see. And of course, another thing to point out is if you hover over most things in this program, it'll give you a hint, like a tooltip that it's showing right now. And so yeah, so if you don't want the name there, you can leave it blank here and it will never show names in the game. And then the tile set you're using, right now there's only 4 available. You can add your own. And then we'll just make this map a little bit bigger, so whatever, I'll just do something like, that might be big, 25 by 20. And then parallax, that is to add graphics behind the map. So for instance, say instead of just having a solid ground map, you have an airship in a game, and behind the airship you just want a scrolling, because you can add this, you can have it loop and scroll. You can have a scrolling sky, and then it'll give the appearance that you're flying on an airship while you're walking around on top of it. But also parallaxing is a different type of mapping where you can create a map in Photoshop rather than using the built-in editor. So you have a lot more control over it. You can add a lot more shading and just do whatever you want. That requires scripts to do, and you can't do that just by default, but that's kind of a way people have used this in a different way to create better maps. And then notes, you can just write some notes about it. And also note boxes are something that some scripts use. So there are people who've added functionality to the engine, and they've also cleverly used note boxes so you can put in some information there. And then encounters we can add troops. So if you have randomized battles that happen, you can add that in here. You can have background music that changes. Anyway, again, I don't want to spend too much time on any one thing. So now we have our map here, and this is just the name of our project. And actually one other thing I want to do is I'll just change the tile set. So how about we just do exterior. The one that we were on is kind of like a world map, so everything's really tiny, all the mountains are tiny compared to your character. And so as you saw, as I just changed it, it changed what was on the map, which in this case was just the default background. But if you have a lot of stuff you've already put in there, it'll completely change, and it'll probably be messed up because tiles aren't in the same place. Where you once had a road, now it's going to be a house or something. So you don't want to change tile sets after you've already created a map, or things are going to get really messed up. So let's just go over the toolbar up here. A lot of this toolbar is also in this menu at the top. So as you see, like we have new project, save project, edit, then this mode, map, event, region, and that's all right here. New project, save project, and then here's map, event, region. So you can really just use these buttons here for most of those things, and also there are shortcuts you can use. So like F5 and F6 are ones you should get used to using, because that's probably a lot quicker to switch between those, and I'll explain what that stuff is in a bit. And there are a few things that are not on that toolbar, like compressed game data. So when you're actually going to save your final project after you're done with it, you'd go here to compress your game data. And then you've got your help menu here, which you should also become familiar with. So RGSS, that's scripting. That's the scripting language. So that's more advanced stuff that you probably won't really be doing much with yet. And so this first tab, this is all just your basic stuff. And also people have created some great tutorials that are like PDFs that are pretty long and sort of go through the whole process of creating a new game, and I highly recommend you read some of those, because those will help out a lot. So you can look through this on your own time. And we've got play testing, which is also this button over here. And another thing I wanted to point out is options. So this, as you can see, has barely anything in it. You can change the transparency color that's over here and the grid. And the reason there isn't a whole lot there is because this is basically the editor, and so there aren't very many options there. The actual game engine itself, you can change all that stuff in a different place. So I'll get to that in a minute. But that's why this seems fairly bare bones. So first, let's just make a really simple map here. And so we're already in this map mode. And so that means the drawing. So you can click on these different tiles, and you have different tabs here. This first tab is for basically the ground layer. And so then we've got tools up here. So I'll use this rectangle and just drag this out. You can also use the fill tool, and our map is a little bit bigger than what's on the screen. But so then you've got their paint bucket thing, so you can quickly change this, but we'll leave it at grass. And this pencil, you might expect to be able to freehand draw on this, but no, this just means you're drawing one square at a time, because this is all on a grid. And you can't see the grid right now, but if you switch over to another mode, event mode, then it actually puts the grid on there. And so I'm just gonna, so you can just kind of freehand draw. It doesn't look very good if you go too quickly with this though. So we'll just draw a little path around just so there's something on here. And our character's already there. So this is all, you can add some bushes in, add a little fence. I'll switch to this tool so you can do something like, whoops. Well, whatever. I'll undo that. Okay. So another thing, we can actually just play test this game right away. So click here, save it, and one other thing I should point out that is slightly different is that there's no music playing right now, and that is because if you hit F1, it'll bring up these options. So I've already unchecked play background music and play sound effects, because they are, of course, when I'm making a tutorial, I don't want this music in the background, so you can't hear me. And also the starting music is incredibly annoying to me, because it's this really piercing sound. And you can change that, of course, too, but by default, it's a really annoying thing. And then you've got gamepad, so you can set up your different buttons if you have a gamepad, and then keyboard, which I've remapped a little bit because I typed Dvorak, so keys are in different spots for me. So that's all that's there. That's hitting F1 after you're playtesting it. So now we can just click for a new game, click with your gamepad or your keyboard, not with the mouse. And now we can just walk around, and if you hold down shift you can run. And if we get to the edges of our map, then it just doesn't let us go anywhere. So pretty boring map we've got here so far. So I will close that, and okay, and I know I'm not really going in order here, but you can hit these buttons to change the size. So if you have a really enormous map, you could do that to zoom out. But since we are just keeping a normal size map here, I'll just leave it 1:1. And well, let's go here next. So we've got our database, and this has a whole lot of things in it. So we have our actors. So this is our starting character. So I'll just change it to Tommy, and you can change your class and your level, max level, description. You can change the graphics here if you click. And these are all your built-in actors and graphics. You can even change yourself into an animal if you want. How about we do that? I'll be this dog. Of course, there's... I don't know if they have a... I don't use these, so I don't think they have a face for a dog, so I'll just leave it where it is. And you can set all your starting things here and your different actors that can join your party. Now, these are not characters you'll meet in the game. I mean, they can be, but these are specifically for characters who you can add to your party. If they're just characters in the game, that's not where you want to go to add them. And you can always change your maximum number. So right now it only shows 10, but you can add more. And if you want to quickly sort of erase these, you can change maximum to 1, and it'll just clear that out. And then I can change it back to 10, and now I've got all these clear or blank characters I can add in here. So that's an easy way, because all this stuff is pre-filled, and chances are you're not going to want to use their default things, because then your game is going to be just like everybody else's who also didn't change the stuff. So we've got classes, and you should recognize this if you've played an RPG. This is fairly typical stuff. These are just your curves, so this is like how quickly you level up and stuff like that. This is again, not going to go too deeply into these things here. Skills you can gain as you gain XP, and so there's a lot here. All this stuff you can do, like how it damages people and stuff like that. Items, you can have it, how much HP, how much health it recovers. You can change all that stuff. Key items, I have a separate tutorial I did on key items if you want to know what that is. And your price, whether you can consume it or not, when you can use it, if it's always or if it's only in battle, stuff like that. So lots of options here. And also it's good to just look through these and see how they did it, because you'll learn a lot just from that. Then you've got your weapons, which is pretty obvious. Armor. As you can see, in some places it has a U, and some places it doesn't, and that might be because I already changed it, or not. I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure. You can change it over here though. And, but of course, it's not going to change it everywhere. Anyway, okay, back to the order we were in. Enemies you fight. This is pretty self-explanatory. Troops, these are, you want to add multiple enemies to a troop, and then you can set which troops you'll run into in the game and stuff like that. So you can like add and remove. So, these are pre-filled. Scorpion ×3, big demon. So this is all for battling. States, also should be familiar with if you've played very many RPGs. Animations, and one thing to point out here is that these animations sort of typically these are used in battles, as you're casting spells or whatever, or attacking people with your sword. But you can actually use these anywhere. So even just on the main map screen, you can use this, say you have a cutscene or something and your character runs into somebody and you want there to be an animation when they bump into each other, then you can put one of these animations over that, and you can resize this. There's a lot you can do. These are all the different frames of animation. You can change, the position of all this stuff. So it actually gives you a lot of control over these animations. Tile sets. So, as I showed, we already changed our tile set to use the exterior tile set instead of the field. And so this is where you go to change your tiles. And there's a lot to be said about this part, but when you buy DLC, which is what it's called on Steam. If you have the game on Steam, then you'll see there's DLC packs, downloadable content, which is sort of a misleading term because normally we just call these resource packs, meaning tile sets and different graphics you can use. And DLC kind of makes you think that it's just automatically going to show up here after you buy it on Steam and download it, but it doesn't. You have to manually add it here. You're going to have to actually go to your Steam folder and find it, and there are links on the forum of like exactly where to find it in your folders. And so you can change the names of your tiles, and you'll see that they have all these different these different names for these tabs. So there's the A tab here and B tab. Actually, here, let me just go to the one that we're currently using. So you really have to pay attention to what these mean, and it tells you here: animation, ground, buildings. These A tiles are really important because what you see right here is actually not what the actual graphic file looks like. If I move this out of the way, you'll see that this ground tile here, this path, is not just repeated everywhere. If it was repeated everywhere, it would be an exact perfect square. And as you can see on these edges, it has these rounded corners on it, and it has this grass is overlapping it. And you wouldn't see that if you were truly just tiling the same, just repeating that one ground tile everywhere. And so what that is because it's called an auto tile, and it has all that information in it. So it's smart about putting those corners in and using different parts of the auto tile just automatically, so you don't even have to think about it. And you can run into some problems later, which is something for another tutorial, but when you are overlapping a lot of different things, then you can run into trouble when things are, it's sort of putting rounded edges where you don't want them and stuff, but there's a way to fix that stuff. And here you'll see different passability settings. So these circles right here just mean that you can walk on it, and these X's mean you can't walk on it. So like these ones up here, this is kind of like a pothole or a river or whatever, depending on what you're using it for. Different water tiles and stuff. So these have X's on them because it does not want you to walk into water or walk on water. And these fence posts have X's on them. So you'll see that I have this fence over here, so I can't actually walk over that. And you can change these if you click on it. But of course, the built-in ones you probably don't want to change. These are all set up appropriately. If you import your own, you're going to actually have to change all this stuff. And so up here, we've got passage, which is what we're looking at here. But you can also fine tune it. If I scroll down a bit, some of these you can only walk, up and down on, like if it's a ladder, which is actually a different tab here, but, it's like some of these have a wall on one side or something, so it won't actually let you walk up on this one, but you can walk left and right and down. And so you do have to pay attention to this stuff when you're importing tiles. And so you've got this tab to tell it that it's a ladder you're walking up, and a bush, counter, and these do different things. And you can hover over these again to know exactly what those do. And so these are all the A tiles here. And then B is a lot simpler. I'll put it back on passage. Actually, that kind of makes it hard to see, but so these tiles are not auto tiles, so they do not automatically do anything for you. But as you can see, most of these are just objects. And so these can go on top of auto tiles. So I can put these signposts down, this well I can put in the middle. Actually, here I can just do that quickly. Go over to B and click on one of these. So there's some barrels and things. And also you can click and drag. So here I'll go to the pencil. So now if I click, it'll put down all 4 of those tiles, whereas if I just clicked once, that looks really weird because it's just a part of a tree. And so you'll actually have to click and drag to highlight all of these. So in this way you can make multiple, you can make it like a whole forest. So now I might actually want to just get the top of the trees and just the sides and just the bottom. And there, now we have 4 trees that are overlapping each other, which you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise if I just used this one. Then also I should point out, if you're using this rectangle tool, I can't just click to put a tree. I have to actually drag it out. And so as you can see, as I was just mentioning, if I drag these out, they're not going to overlap, so it's not going to look very good. So let's go back into our tile sets thing. So these are the B tiles. And another thing I should say is that if you actually want to interact with these, aside from just not being able to walk over it, if you want to actually be able to click on it and, say throw a penny down the well or whatever, then you'll have to add an event. And so I'll get to that in a minute too. But that might be, you might not actually want to just draw it on. And so anyway, so I don't have to go through all these. So you can click on these to change it. So you can only use one tile set per map, but you can change it mid-game. Like I was saying before, if you change it to a completely different tile set, everything's going to be messed up, and because the tiles are not in the same place. But what you can do is create like a winter tile set where everything's in the exact same spot, and you can create a summer tile set. And so as you progress through the game and the seasons change, then you can actually change the tile set during the game, and then it'll become winter, but all the characters will still be in the same spots and everything, so you don't actually have to create a new map. You can just change the tile set. So that's one use for that. Let's see, common events. These, well, I haven't even explained regular events, so I won't explain this stuff, but that's more advanced stuff. And system, this has options. So transparent on, this is if you want to start your game with a transparent character. Like, so if you're starting with a cutscene or scrolling text or something like that, then you do want to turn transparency on, because you don't want to see your character at first, and then you'll add an event that will make your character visible again once the game truly starts. And you've got your game title here, and you can choose a different graphic if you want. Starting positions, which you don't actually have to, it's easier to just add it on the map. You can add your starting position rather than actually going into here. I probably would never do it that way. Sound effects, music. So here's what I was talking about earlier. You can change the theme music on the title screen, because I can't stand that. And your initial party. So if you want to start with multiple characters, you can add more people here. And your game title and your window color, you can double click to change your windows. That's when you're actually talking to people and there's dialogue popping up. That's the window they're talking about, or your actual menu. And then here's some vehicles. And terms, and system also, your currency unit, which is kind of important. And you can change that to an icon if you want, like a gold icon instead of this. There are scripts that can do that a lot easier. So you might not even want to use this, but if you want, you can put a $sign in, or whatever, a pound sign, that is British pounds, not not hashtags. Terms, I briefly clicked on this earlier to change armor to get rid of the U, but here you can just change what some of these things do. And so this is, it's saying what the default name is, and then you can name it something else. So some people actually use some of these things for a completely different thing. Like for instance, this key item, some people create a quest log with this, so they actually don't use key items at all for the normal way. They just they change this to call it quests or quest log or something like that, and then they use it in a way that was not really intended in the game. So that's why this has, you can adjust all these names here. And yeah, so then here, if you really want to get rid of the U in armor, you'll have to go through all of these and change it, or just, delete them and add your own. So that's about it in there. Now, you've got your resource manager is the next thing, which, as I explained in my other Sprite tutorial video, you don't actually have to use this really. You can just drag your files into the folders, in Windows or whatever, rather than actually clicking the import button and going through all that. You can just drag and drop all of them at once. It's kind of easier, and they should just automatically appear. And they will appear with a red dot to indicate that they're imported rather than built in. And I should also mention that the built-in stuff, all the stuff that you see that's by default, that's called RTP. That's runtime package. And when you go to compress your game over here, so say we've finished our whole game and we want to, or we've finished part of it and we want people to test it and give us feedback, you can compress the game and send it out to people. And so here's this term RTP, and this includes all those files. So all these graphic files, all the music, everything that comes with a default game, which you may not be using. You might not use all the music, and you might not use all these characters. You might change all the graphics entirely and not use any of it. So you can either, but this gets a little complicated. So you can either include it or not include that. And if you don't include it, then the person running the game has to already have that installed. So if they've ever installed, if they have RPG Maker on their computer, then you don't need to include it for them. And if they've installed another RPG Maker game that included it, then they should already have it. So you don't have to include it. But if you're sending this out to a friend of yours who's never played any of these, then you should include it, even if you're not using it, because I think it'll give them an error. And you can, there is a tutorial on the RPG Maker web forums about how to not include any of it. So it's a little bit more complicated to do that. But so that's only if you're really not using any of it, or you are using some of it, but you have to manually include just the parts that you're using. And that way you can really reduce the file size, because all the RTP stuff, there's a lot of stuff in there that you might not be using at all. So just wanted to mention that. So that was the resource manager. Script editor. So this, like I was saying, this is like your editor over here, but now these scripts in here, this is everything that runs your game, basically, once you actually export the whole thing. So vocab here, these are terms in the game. So you can edit this stuff directly, although you shouldn't do that right away. And depending on what you're doing, you might not want to edit any of this stuff at all, because you could break your game if you're not careful and you don't really know what you're doing, because this is, like I said, this is all the code that's running the actual engine. I mean, this is the engine. So you can see over here, there's a lot of stuff in here. And the nice thing about this, though, is that you can modify it all. Usually what people do when they write scripts is they don't actually, when they release a script, you're actually just adding a new script down here. So like there are already some bug fix scripts here. And this materials section here, where it says insert here, you can right click and insert, and then I'll just add a completely blank line here. or blank page where you can paste in a script and you can add the name of the script here. And so that can add different functionality to your game. And a lot of those scripts are easy to use. Some of them you don't have to configure at all. Some of them you have to configure a little bit. And there are other ones where, as I mentioned before, with those note boxes, you'll actually have to add, you'll have to install the script here, but then you'll also have to add note tags to do what you want it to do. So, that's all explained in the scripts that you see. But some of those can be a little tricky to use, and sometimes you have to set up switches and variables and things. So there's a whole range of complexity there. But what I was going to say was that the scripts usually just kind of, it's called aliasing, where it won't just modify this. It won't just like change what this is. It'll leave all this stuff intact, and it'll just copy it essentially down here. So it won't actually, even though it is changing the functionality of the engine, it's leaving the stuff intact. So if you ever delete the script, then everything goes back to normal, So you're not actually destroying anything up here. So just in case something breaks, you can just delete the script and everything should be okay again. And then sound test, just if you want to test the different sounds, music sounds, and that stuff. And then we've got a character generator, and these are called chibi characters. These are the ones with the VX Ace that have these either large heads and tiny bodies, or normal size heads and or whatever, however you want to say it. But they have these very strange proportions. You can also get characters called Mac characters, and those are sort of more normal looking characters with longer bodies. But this is all you can do with the character generator, is this type of character, and it'll also generate a face for you, and then you can output the character and output the face. You can click this stuff to generate random, and you can get some really ugly characters this way. Unfortunately, these faces, because of the way this works, the faces are always looking straight ahead, and then of course you can manually change anything you want. These faces always look straight ahead at you, which is not how you would normally do it if you were an artist and you can draw it yourself, or what most games would use. They usually have the character looking to the side, so it's more like characters are looking at each other and talking back and forth rather than looking straight out of the screen. It's kind of weird. So it's better if you can hire an artist to draw some character faces for you, or character busts, which are more than just the face. It's, the face and the upper body. And that character generator has limited options. Just quickly, I will mention that there's this other program called Game Character Hub. And this gives you a lot more options. So there's all these different things you can add in here. And this is available on Steam. And so you can create different characters here. VX XP is the older version of RPG Maker, but you can still use these characters, although the animation is slightly different, so you may have to modify these files before you can use them in VX Ace. But it's not too hard to do. And so you may want to just look into this program if you're interested in creating more characters. I just got this, so I can't say too much about it. But anyway, that's Game Character Hub. And so now on here, let's just create some events, or I'll show you what this event tab does. This is basically where all of your game is going to be made after you've created your levels. So it's on a grid, and it shows the grid here. And now I can just double click anywhere, or I can right click and hit new event, or I can hit enter. There's lots of different ways. But I usually just double click because it's the quickest, and it'll bring up this event window. And here is where you kind of add everything. So, you'll notice that before I was saying that you don't add characters in that actor tab that's in the database, and that's because you add it through an event, and you don't add it through a character thing. You might be looking like, where do I add characters? Where do I add objects? Like, what if I want to do this or that? Well, it's all just through events. Pretty much everything is just through an event, and you have to kind of manually do it. So now I'll click on graphic, and again, this is showing all the, your normal RTP stuff that came with the game, and also it shows your tiles that you're using. So these might be different depending on what tile set you're using. And so let's just say I want to add a character, so I'll add this one. So I can click anywhere, and this is which way the character is going to be facing initially, but if I have the character walking around, then you'll see all these different sides of the character. So it doesn't really matter which one of these I click on, except if the character is just going to be standing still, then you want to choose which direction the character is going to be facing. And then you've got your options here for animating it. So when I clicked on it, it actually changed this priority. I think by default it's below characters. Now it put it on same as characters because it knows that I chose an actual animated character. So priority is a weird term to use. You should probably ignore that word because it doesn't really tell you anything. Maybe it should just be called layer or something. I don't know what a better word would be for it, but basically this is just saying below characters, can you walk over it? Is it the same as your character? Can you bump into it? Or is it above characters? Is it floating above you like a cloud? So that's what you want to choose here, depending on what it is. So since it's an actual character and I don't want to walk over it or under it, I want to actually bump into it because it's a physical object. It's going to be same as character. And trigger action button, I want to be able to click on the character. As I walk up to the character, I want to click on it. And then, so that's what action button is, but then you can also just be touch. So if you just bump into it, and event touch, and auto run, parallel process, these are not things you'd really use for characters. I mean, kind of depends on what you're doing again, but that's sort of, you use that more for non-character things. And then you can have your direction fixed so the character is always going to be looking in the same direction, whereas without it, if I walk up to the character from the side, the character will turn and face me, and that's what you want usually for a character. And through means you're going to actually walk through it. So again, because this is a character, you don't want that. You can change movement, so I'll put random movement on. It's better to use random as opposed to like custom, because I think it actually uses less processor power to just do a random movement. So if you want it to, like a patrolling guard to be walking around a tower or something, then you'd want to use a custom route. But since we just want it to kind of run around randomly, then we'll just do that, and you can change the speed and all that. So then you can name your event here, which we don't really need to do right now. And I'll just quickly show you, I'll just say some text, hello. And so that's because we have this set on the triggers action button. When I go up, this character will say hello. So now I can move this character around, this event. Again, it's not really a character, it's just an event that happens to be a character because that's what I'm deciding it's going to be. So let's play test this game quickly and hit new game. And also, if I hold down shift, or well, in my case, that's the default is shift, then you can run faster. If you're not holding it down, then you walk. And then your other button, that's, depending on how your keys are, that's to pull up your menu. So then you can see what items you have, your armor, skills, all this stuff, your status. So that's just how you play the game, saving your game. Then in the bottom left, you can see how much gold you have. So now if I walk up to this character and click the action button, then it turns and faces me and says hello. And that's all. Oh, and we have this part of a tree here that we don't want. Oh well. And so then, like I said, I can't actually walk over these barrels because the tile set is already set correctly. And so that's the basics of it. Oh, and regions, I guess I didn't say this. This, you can use all these numbers to paint different regions on here. And this is for like random battles, you know, so you can have different regions that you'll face different enemies depending on which region you're in. But also, a lot of scripts use regions in different ways. So basically, for like puzzles or something, you can use regions to make it a lot easier so that it's kind of too complicated to get into. But anyway, some scripts do use regions, or here's an example. There's a script you can get that prevents, so here, this character walking around randomly, it's completely random. So this character can walk anywhere. But what if I want this character to just really stay in this basic area? Say this is like the town square or something. Or it's like right in front of the shop that this character owns, or the house, or whatever. So there's a script you can download and install where you can use regions to prevent the character from walking on that region. So I can basically just draw like an invisible fence around that. And so that's a really great script to use if that's the sort of functionality you need. And so that's just one example, but there are a lot of other ways you can use regions. People figure out clever ways of using everything in this. So you won't really be using that too much. But that's it. And I think that's pretty much, I think I got to everything here. I'll do more tutorials for beginners. So my next one will just show how to create a simple quest and stuff like that. But that was just trying to get you familiar with the program. I hope that wasn't too confusing. So check out my other tutorials. Thanks.